Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
Today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, Kelcey Rock will be joining us. He's running against Michael Meredith in House District 19 race. We'll be interviewing him, and we'll finish up our discussion on the incumbents that the establishment is trying to take down the conservatives by ending on the Candy Massaroni versus Andy Stone race that's going on in the 50th House District. All very exciting topics, and I hope you tune in with us tomorrow. Should be having a big discussion, making our picks, me and a few other quote-unquote esteemed experts on how we think some of these elections will turn out this upcoming Tuesday. But before we dig into all of that, I want you to head on down to the costume shop and buy some capes and maybe a mask, because there is a few candidates and a judge executive in Boone County, Kentucky, who is not just mad, but they are super duper mad. Why? Well, because the Boone County Republican Party did something slightly unheard of. As a party and as an organization, they sent out a mail piece into the area detailing the candidates in the Republican Party primaries. They send out a mailer that has 5 races detailed on it. Senate District 11, and it has Representative Steve Rawlings, says he supported public schools and teachers by passing and co-sponsoring the student discipline bill. Tough on crime, endorsed by Boone County Sheriff and Commonwealth Attorney. Versus Dwayne Froelicher, accepted endorsement from Michael Adams, who was censored by multiple Kentucky GOPs for neglecting election integrity, favoring liberal Democrats, and defying the law. And they did grab a photo of him where he's got a COVID mask down around his chin versus, of course, Steve Rawlings, who is a nice photo. Then you have Representative Marion Proctor, a nicer photo, obviously, that says, strong advocate of repealing certificate of need laws, a bureaucratic barrier hindering healthcare choice and affordability, passed school choice constitutional amendment. Verse Chris Pavese, proudly touts being endorsed by and receiving $50,000 from a liberal Louisville Teachers Union, liberal West Coast values, and only registered as a Republican last year to get elected. And then there's Chris sitting in a chair in a black and white photo, passed out, holding a beer bottle. And then it has Representative Savannah Maddox versus Jared Likens. Representative Savannah Maddox passed constitutional carry, never voted for a single tax increase, 100% voting record with the American Conservative Union. First, Jared Likens, who is funded and supported by the Leftist Teachers Union, has publicly supported Kissinger, Crenshaw, and billions in funding for Ukraine. Then they have TJ Roberts, sued Andy Beshear to reopen churches, staunch advocate for pro-life causes, backed by Representative Thomas Massie and National Association for Gun Rights. Verse C. Ed Massey, unapologetic Hillary Clinton donor, backed by radical left Frankfurt lobbyists, introduced bill to double gas tax. And then the final race they cover is Representative Steve Doan, who repealed sales tax on gold, lowered income taxes, passed school choice constitutional amendment, versus Diane Brown, who has her law license suspended and received $25,000 from liberal Louisville Teachers Union PAC. So that's the mailer, right? And obviously the candidates that they're targeting here are upset because it hurts them. If the mailer was sent out and it made the other side's candidates look good, they wouldn't be complaining at all. They would love it. They'd be defending it. I mean, there's really no principle here at all. There's nothing for them to be upset about. They just want to complain because it hurts them. And that's okay. That's what you do in campaigns. When something hurts you, you always find a reason to explain how it's somehow unfair. But meanwhile, a lot of times you'll do the same things back the other direction and see nothing wrong with it. So we can see why they're super duper mad. But the Boone County Judge Executive is also really mad. Actually, he recently said to the Cincinnati Enquirer, it says, this is from Boone County Judge Executive Gary Moore, said the mailer was a hit piece against candidates the local committee doesn't support. This is about the role of the party. The Republican Party should be trying to encourage more voter turnout. It should be trying to encourage people to get involved in the party and become candidates. Politics has become so ugly, he said. Why would some newcomer want to put their name on the ballot and become a candidate if their party is going to manufacture misinformation? Now, of course, they didn't actually create misinformation on the mailer. I mean, what they said was accurate. What Judge Moore, though, is hitting on is a debate, a real debate that's going on, and that is what is exactly the role of your local, your state, your national Republican Party. But before we get to the substance on what he's exactly saying, I don't want to, once again, actually pretend that there is some principle he actually has here. Judge Moore is worried about one thing. Well, really one person, and that is Chet Hand. See, Chet Hand is the chair of the Boone County Republican Party. And the Boone County Republican Party does a great job in primaries in directing them even before this mailer and having a lot of influence over how the voters of the district will vote. And Chet Hand is currently a county magistrate. Now, for those of you who don't know, a judge executive is like the mayor of a county, and a county magistrate is like a city council member. So Judge Moore has a lot of concern here that Chet Hand, the chair of the Boone County Party, might come for his job one day and take him out, and may be able to, because Chet Hand is, even though he's only a county magistrate, is in the world of politics, in Judge Moore's views, more powerful than Judge Moore. But I think what Judge Moore is failing to understand is that Chet Hand isn't more powerful than Judge Moore. Chet Hand simply represents the viewpoints and values of the Republicans making up their county committee, making up their county of Republicans. It's not that he individually is somehow powerful in directing things. It's that he is simply representing the beliefs and viewpoints of the rest of the party apparatus. If you think I'm wrong, while I don't know much about how this mailer was decided and sent out, I'm 100% positive there was a vote amongst the Boone County Republican Party, and there's about 100 people that show up to that meeting each and every month, on whether or not they wanted to send out this mailer and whether they wanted to get involved in this way. There was an active vote taken on this, I promise you. Because if there wasn't, well, they could make a case that Chet Hand is out of order. He shouldn't be doing this and should be forcibly removed from his position as chair. That is something the county committee can do, with or without Chet Hand's, of course, approval. That's why Judge Moore is really worried about it. It's nothing to do with the principle, but Chet Hand. But moving past his motivations, perhaps he is right about the debate itself. What is the role of the party? Is it to win elections, or is it to forward the Republican Party platform? Which does require winning elections, forwarding the Republican Party platform, but it offers a nuance to the viewpoint because it says, well, people aren't following our principles and party platform just because they put an R next to their name doesn't mean they're necessarily a Republican who we want to support, because they're not going to forward our party platform. They could actually, maybe, perhaps, hurt it more. And it's obvious that we see this when we take a look at county parties. The most active county parties that have the most amount of people showing up to them are the ones that engage in things like censoring Mitch McConnell or Michael Adams, or get a little more vocal in the primaries. Why? Because the average person doesn't volunteer, get involved with their county party because they just are team red shirt. The average citizen out here that decides it's time for me to get involved, I want to get up there and fight, they're fighting for principle, not a team. This isn't sports. And when you tell them, no, you have to support the team no matter what, even when it goes against your principles, that's demoralizing, and they want to quit. So actually, while Judge Moore is talking about an interesting debate, his assertion that somehow this is stopping the county party and Republican Party from growing and activism is patently false. It actually, by the stats and data, is only increasing the amount of people involved in the Republican Party. Well, coming up after this, we'll be talking to Kelcey Rock. He'll be joining us for an interview. We'll be back after a few short minutes. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, your source for Kentucky politics. I'm joined by the great and powerful Kelcey Rock. He's running against a Michael Meredith down there in Bowling Green, Kentucky. That's District 19. Meredith, longtime incumbent. Kelcey Rock, though, happy to have you on. Thanks for taking time out of your campaigning to join us.
Thank you, Andrew. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be on your show today.
We'll see how much of a privilege it ends up being. We'll see how on your game you are. Um, let's first start off. Tell us all a little bit about your background and just the basics of who Kelcey Rock is.
All right, that's an easy one. Kelcey Rock. I'm running for state representative, District 19. My family and I live on a farm out in Alvaton, Kentucky. That's a little area outside of Bowling Green. We have a small dairy farm. We milk. Our kids show dairy cattle. I have lived in Bowling Green for several years now. I have been a banker for 20 some years, and I'm still working in finance, but I've left banking in order to pursue this to make sure I'm able to give this candidacy, and my constituents the very best I can give them. I have two children, Michael and Ridge, and there's a question I constantly get every time I'm out door knocking, and that is, why are you doing this? Or they'll ask my wife, why is he doing this? And the easiest answer for that is Michael and Ridge. I'm doing it for my kids, not just my kids, but everyone's kids. I'm doing it to promote a better future for them, to preserve conservative values across the Commonwealth, to fight for our individual rights, our freedoms, to shrink government, to ensure that we have a future in the great Commonwealth here.
Wow. Sound like a great guy. I mean, not here to necessarily shill for anybody, but at the same time, so you're a farmer. Okay, so you've got the hard work kind of working with your hands background that I think a lot of people don't have that are typically going into politics, especially and not that I've got a lot of friends of mine that are legislators, that are lawyers or realtors or those kinds of things. So I'm not here to talk bad necessarily about lawyers or realtors, but so often they haven't as much worked with their hands, had to build things. So seeing a farming background is interesting, but at the same time, having the banking background, obviously that gives you a leg up on some of the more financial issues, how to, of course, handle your money, something that we see the legislature not doing super great. You talked about why you're running a bit there, but let me ask you, is there something specific going on with the state legislature, with the House, that you're saying, look, this is something I want to step in here, I want to fix, I want to address, and I think I'm the man who can get the job done?
Yes, one of my hot topics, or my most pressing matter, is school choice. I am a big advocate for school choice. I like to sometimes call it parents and students' rights. I think that every student in Kentucky deserves or their parent deserves the right to choose the type of education that they receive, whether it's private, public, charter, homeschool, whatever have you. I believe that's their right, and I want their tax dollars to move toward it and for it. I want I want them to have the best opportunity afforded to them, regardless of their income, their assets. I want it to be an equal playing field for rich and poor to have a quality education.
And not to give away the bag too much, but your opponent there, Michael Meredith, voted no on Amendment 2, which wasn't voting. I want to make sure everybody's clear. That's not voting for even school choice. That's just voting for voters to have the opportunity to vote on whether or not they want the legislators to even have the conversation about school choice. So it's not even exactly school choice. It's just saying, look, can we even have an honest debate here? And he voted no on that constitutional amendment. So it's pretty clear why you're stepping up to the plate. As you're out there talking to people and in your district there in Warren County, because I'm sure people like Michael Meredith will just say, well, it's because you hate public schools and this is a rural area and it's only serving rich people, so on and so forth. What has been the feedback from the voter on that issue, coupled with what do you say back to those people that say you just hate public schools and you just want to be able to send your kid to a nice private school on the taxpayer dimes because you're hateful and awful.
Out here in Warren and Edmonson County, as I've been door knocking, I've not run into that as much as I thought I would. I've actually, funny enough, ran into a teacher who is a big advocate for school choice as well. And my stepmom is a teacher's aide, so I'm in public school back where I'm from. So I fully understand what teachers go through and what support staff and other employees go through, but I've not had a lot of people opposed to it, which is really funny. That I can go and talk to teachers, talk to school board members, and they all have certain concerns and certain issues, but they've all been receptive to hearing it, which it makes it even more interesting that Mr. Meredith voted against school choice while door knocking our area, I've not heard a single person really, that opposed to it. So it doesn't seem like he's representing what I've seen in the area.
Now, as you're out there and you're talking to folks and things, I know priorly you'd ran for county magistrate, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
How has this experience of running in this House race like this compared to running for county magistrate? A little bit more of a local race, still both local, but how do you compare the two?
Like apples and oranges. They were similar in some ways, but very different. Of course, it was for county magistrate for the 6th district in Warren County, which is a very large area of Warren County, very populous. It actually is about the 6th district represents the same amount of people, around 40-some thousand, that the state house District 19 represents. Different people, some overlap, but around the same number of people. And a lot of the issues that came up have been universal almost. People are very concerned about children, about social issues. Of course, as when I was running for magistrate, there wasn't a lot, they could do about it. That's more of a state house and Senate situation. But it's been some overlapping territory. I've seen a lot of, long story short, I've seen a lot of the same issues. People from 2 years ago have the same concerns that they did that they did then.
How'd you become a Republican? How'd you become a conservative?
How I became a Republican is I went and got my driver's license, and I went with my dad to sign for me. And when I was 16 years old, and they asked me if I wanted to fill out a voter registration card, and I said sure. And I asked my dad what I was. Now, because that's what he was. Now, let's fast forward. In college, I joined College Republicans, which is very unusual for I went to the University of Kentucky. So kind of a liberal school, but I joined the College Republicans. I helped on Republican campaigns. I decided that those core values were my core values. And then as I've continued life, that's been 20 years now, I have kept up with politics. I've monitored it, and I have watched the core values of the Republican Party kind of dwindle. I've watched people who say they're Republicans, they run as Republican, but they're not. They clearly don't embody the values of what it means to be a conservative. So
I think
I
think that's an interesting point, and I want to dig into a little bit more on what to you, because you opened up, I don't want to say a can of worms, but you opened up a can of worms there, as you say, the core principles of what is a Republican and what that is, and to you, how you see that we've, as a party, in a lot of situations, fallen away from those core principles. I'm curious to have your take on that, because that's obviously become a very big argument. I mean, obviously, you didn't hear the segment before this, where I was digging into a situation that's going on out of Boone County regarding the county party getting involved in a primaries a little bit more than makes some people comfortable, in order to specifically protect those Republican values, and a lot of the candidates up there very upset about it. And so it's always interesting to hear from people on what they think of when they hear, hey, these are the core Republican values. So I'm going to be asking you that question, but we are coming up on a break. So if people want to hear the answer, they're going to have to stay tuned in. So we'll be back in a few short minutes. As always, if you want to reach out to the show, feel free to email info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. And if you have somebody you'd like us to interview, feel free to reach out to as well. Not only can you email, but you can also head on over to theandrewshow.com and hit that contact tab and leave a message for the show there too as well. Well, anyways, we will be back here with Mr. Rock's response to this question in a few short minutes. And you are back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show, and I'm talking here with Kelcey Rock. He's running against Michael Meredith in the Warren, Edmonton County areas in House District 19. And before the break, we were talking, just kind of getting to know Mr. Rock a little bit better, as he's really as rock solid of a candidate as we want him to be. Oh, gosh, that is a funny pun there. Have you used that in the campaign at all?
I have not.
Rock solid? Well, you can have that one for free, okay? That one, no consulting fees necessary. And so before the break, Kelcey Rock had mentioned that, he's seen the Republican people, specifically people in office and parts of the Republican Party, kind of falling away from the core principles that make the Republican Party the Republican Party. And I'm curious to hear from Kelcey what he thinks those core principles are.
Yeah, well, I think there's a few core principles and then a few other beliefs derived from those principles that are natural and kind of organic with it. Conservative is that in its very name. They're conservative. They're fiscally conservative. They want small government. With small government comes small budgets. Conservatives, Republicans are in for individual rights, individual freedoms. And with that comes protecting those individual freedoms, those individual rights. With that, your Second Amendment stuff, that personal property rights, etc. And with that comes the sanctity of life. And there's Republicans out there that are going back and forth on the pro-life, pro-choice situation.
So what is the House doing that you think, hey, look, I need to step in here and try to fight for what should be our conservative bedrock?
Well, I'll start with, since it was budget year, the budget. You've seen it. It is giant. We're spending $20 billion more than we've ever spent in years past. I know inflation's has been a key driver in that, but that's still way above inflation terms. That combined with, I'm completely for income tax reduction, but the personal services and that kind of sales tax addition has actually just increased our tax burden when I want to decrease the tax burden felt by everyday Kentuckians. And then we go into some of these pushes with DEI, CRT, SEL. Those issues are going against protecting children, protecting their life, their innocence, keeping them from being exposed to, illicit materials, public displays of, graphic nature, drag shows, etc. There's funding going toward these programs. And although, SB 150 earlier did a great job with protecting their schools and programs, rec leagues, et cetera, that still aren't honoring the law or following the law.
So I don't think it's a big secret that your race there has gotten a little ugly. A lot of money spent. Teachers unions out of Louisville coming in to reward Michael Meredith for his no vote on that constitutional amendment. No, and hoping to buy his influence into the future. A lot of money. Chamber of Commerce dumping money in, everything else. What has been, and campaigns, they get ugly. They do. I always tell people when they're looking at running for office and, they say, especially too, if they're running against an incumbent and they say, look, I don't want a negative campaign. I always tell them, I say, look, one, you're going to be negative campaigned against. Get over it. And they're most likely going to cross the line too. But two, as long as you keep it honest and about a person's voting record, it's completely reasonable that you would want to say some things about your opponent, because obviously you're running against them. If you thought he was doing a great job, if you thought Representative Meredith was doing a great job, you wouldn't be running for office. What are some of the most outrageous claims you've seen made against you in this campaign? What have you found out about yourself that you didn't know before you started running for state house, and they started spending all this money trying to protect Michael Meredith there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's gotten very nasty down here in Evanston and Warren County. Lots of groups. I mean, teachers union threw $25,000 to Michael Meredith to help attack me. And I guess what I want to say on the negative stuff, a lot of my negative things or various people supporting me, it's been talking about his voting record. I mean, he is a 14-year veteran in the House.
Well, not just his voting record, but also how, he's sexually had sexual misconduct with the state House employee. And that is very fair to hit him on, because our tax dollars had to pay for that settlement.
Exactly.
So,
he was a sitting legislator at that time, and our tax dollars paid for that settlement. You're exactly right. On the negative stuff he's attacking me on, instead of standing on his own record, which you would think after 14 years he would have a solid enough record. He could just stand on all the great things he's done for our community. But that's not where he's going. He's doing personal attacks. There was a child support issue where I changed jobs, and they hit me for half a month worth of child support being behind, which was almost fixed before it was an issue.
Real quick on that. I could be wrong. I could be remembering wrong, but doesn't Michael Meredith's wife work for the office that prosecutes child support?
Yes, she is a assistant county attorney, and her area is the child support enforcement. Yes, you are correct on that one.
So I have never, in my time here, obviously, I don't often talk to people about child support, but I've never heard of a county attorney's office going after somebody for half a month of child support that was then paid back like a day later.
Well, I've never heard of it, and my attorney hadn't either. They were a little dumbfounded by it, and they handle a lot of these types of situations. So it was a little unusual, and I hear that. Of course, this is my only situation with it, so I don't know what's normal and what's not. But it was a little unusual, according to my attorney as well.
It smells bad. But Meredith is moving into the personal side of things, attacking on some erroneous claims, while at the same time weaponizing. It appears that the family's weaponizing an office that the wife works in, just in order to score political points. And, I think that would make any voter uncomfortable. If you're willing to do this many corrupt things, what have you done that we haven't found out about?
Exactly. Going to these kind of depths just to keep power is kind of outlandish. But I mean, he's been in there for 14 years. So I'm sure there's been more than a few times that these kind of tactics and other things have been used against his opponents.
Well, Kelcey, thank you so much for joining me. Now, I know I will be seeing you this Saturday. I think this race is important. I think, as we kind of went through, Meredith is, one, uniquely a awful individual and candidate personally, but two, at the same time, I've known you for a few years. I think you're a great guy. So I'll be down there this Saturday, knocking doors for you. I will be meeting at 9:30 local time. So that's not Eastern Standard Time, but Central, right?
It's Central Time.
I almost said Western Time, but so Central Time. We're meeting at Fillmore Park at 9:30 to hit some doors. I'll bring some coffee or something for everybody, so that way we're ready to go. So if you want to get active in the area, Kelcey Rock sounds like your kind of guy. Well, join me down in Bowling Green. And hey, no matter where you're at, drive on down if you want to. But even if you don't support Kelcey Rock, just make sure you get out there and you support the candidates that you do like, because it is getting down to the wire. And as I always say, you have to earn a right to complain, and you haven't earned it until you get out there and put in more work and effort than just, throwing things at the TV when Joe Biden's on. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you Saturday.
Thank you, Andrew. I look forward to seeing everyone Saturday.
All right, we'll be back in a few short minutes. You're back here in this final segment of the Andrew Cooperrider Show on a wonderful, wonderful Wednesday. And so for the last two-ish episodes, I've been digging into the establishment, what they're doing. I've talked about what they're attacking, the open seats they're trying to pick up, and then also about who they're trying to take down. I've kind of went through a litany of incumbents that they're taking action against and why, but the final candidate I would be remiss if we didn't talk about is Candy Massaroni, who's the incumbent in House District 50. And she has Andy Stone running against her. And this is an interesting race here. So the establishment, the Uniparty, the forces of evil here, whatever you want to call them, they want to take down Candy Massaroni because they see this as a attack of opportunity. Now, Candy does vote a way they do not like. She is clearly a conservative. She's clearly somebody that will take a stand against their corrupt beliefs and pushes. She's clearly somebody who will not be bought off by the special interests, so they don't like her voting record, but they're focusing so heavily here because they think Candy Massaroni might be easier than the rest of the current incumbents to take down. And that really has to do with the story of how Candy got to be the District 50 representative, because it's actually extremely fascinating and speaks to just how uninformed our average voter is. So rewind to 2022. And the current office holder at that time is Chad McCoy, who had been in office since 2016. And I believe he was also the House Majority Whip as well. So he was a member of leadership. He was very much so establishment, very much so a part of the higher echelon Uniparty in Frankfort. I mean, on his way out, this has been a big issue in Bardstown. On his way out, he was able to help effectuate and get this done. And for those of you who are unaware with the barrel taxes, there was a law in Kentucky that every barrel of bourbon that was aging, every barrel of liquor aging in Kentucky would be taxed per barrel per year and paid to the local governments. And the reason why they put this in place was because the bourbon industry's tourism that comes with it is not particularly very profitable for local counties and cities. Actually, it's kind of harmful because they cannot charge a local option sales tax. They can't charge a sales tax locally. So you show up in their counties as a visitor, they provide you services and everything else. But if you're doing a free tour at a bourbon distillery, while that may create a few tourism jobs that are generally low paid and not super high payroll, at the same time, though, it doesn't create a whole lot more revenues. A lot of times these tours are free. The revenues are generated from the sale of the bourbon. So the profits being made and the occupational tax, both things that the county can make money off of, aren't exactly very profitable. But the other place that the county makes money off of is the property tax as well. So they put in place this barrel tax in order to allow these counties to more accurately capture the tourism revenue. Well, the bourbon industry didn't want those barrel taxes, and I don't necessarily disagree with their concern there. There's a better way to do this than to literally tax them for aging bourbon, and for some, it could be better to just, ship your barrels out of state and store your bourbon there, different options there, and it was hurting the bourbon industry, they said, and maybe they were right. Well, the problem was, and you take places like Bardstown, Nelson County, which is where District 50 is, and so it's got a large bourbon industry that Chad McCoy was in hock to, but he couldn't do this while he's in office. On his way out, he repealed that barrel tax, and that really messed over places like Bardstown and Nelson County because they had made property tax deals with the distilleries in order to get them to come there so they could collect the barrel tax. But the barrel tax being taken away, and they also now aren't getting the property tax, well, lo and behold, the counties and the cities are left holding the bag, and they're having big problems figuring out how they're going to fund their education into the future. Because the property tax that they would have made from their schools was being made up by a barrel tax that now no longer exists, but the deals are in place about the tax exemptions. So it's kind of a difficult thing. So he's definitely part of the establishment. It's important to note that barrel tax thing too, as we discuss further. So Candy declares against Chad McCoy, and she declares to run against Chad McCoy. That's who she thought she was going to run against. But then a John Bradley declares, who is or was like the county Republican Party chairman, which is odd. Normally, the Republican Party chairman would not run against a longtime incumbent. And so that indicated one of a few things. It either indicates when you see that they're running a candidate to kind of help half the other person's votes, the non-incumbent vote. So if, Chad thinks he only really has 40% of support, he goes out there, he recruits somebody else to run, and then they can split up the other 60% between the two, 30 and 30, and then Chad can win, which is 40, right? That's a reason. But the other reason is that they're trying to do something called a handoff, where they're going to decide not to run for office, and they've handpicked who their replacement would be. Well, Chad McCoy decided he wanted to do a handoff. And I remember talking to Candy Massaroni about this at the time, and she had asked me what's going on. And as I predicted, Chad McCoy decided he was not running for re-election. But as he screwed this up. For some unknown reason, he didn't withdraw till after his name was printed on the deadline. So, while he wasn't running for office, he did have his name printed on the ballot on election day. Now, ads were run, mailers sent, literal signs on election day that said Chad McCoy isn't running, and Chad McCoy endorsed Bradley. Articles are wrote about it, mailers sent, ads made, door knocks done about it to inform as many voters as they could that Chad McCoy wasn't running, and he had endorsed Chad Bradley. Remember, there were even signs on election day in the booth that said, "Don't vote for Chad McCoy. He is not running." Well, come election day, Candy Massaroni beats Bradley by like 80 votes. However, over 400 people voted for Chad McCoy. So all else being equal, if Chad had dropped out early, the belief of the establishment is that Bradley would have won. Plus, they feel like, well, we initially didn't really take Candy seriously, and now we know better. Now, by the way, that over 400, that's over like 15% of the people who voted. 15% of the people who voted in that Republican primary literally voted for somebody who wasn't running. There were signs saying he wasn't running and had endorsed the other guy. So Candy Massaroni looks like easy pickings. So they've recruited Andy Stone, and they're really swinging for the fence on this one huge. They're spending $160,000 in outside spending, and Stone has raised $50,000. So you'd think that, well, this one should be in the bag for them. But there's some outside factors here, coupled with the fact that Andy Stone is a really horrible candidate on the conservative side of things, from a conservative viewpoint, that is playing a huge part. First, to Andy Stone just being a bad candidate. He would literally be better off right now if he Joe Biden did. If he just went, sat in his basement, and never showed up to an event and never said anything. He'd literally do better if he just shut up. Because he's literally at candidate forums talking about how he would raise the gas tax, raise taxes on people, and then he himself, literally himself, is running ads, one of which I played on this show, where he is actively saying that SEL, which is another part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI liberal agenda, is a good thing, and the school should be spending even more money on that. The other issue Andy Stone has here is he has been a part of the school board. And a lot of the local people are none too happy about the school board, mainly due to a high school merger issue going on in the county. And of course, just general angst regarding, generally liberal teachings and a liberal school board. Just kind of the normal run-of-the-mill things we see in a lot of counties. And he also has a history of giving to Democrats. Surprise, surprise. On top of that, the establishment kind of has left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths locally due to the Chad McCoy barrel tax thing. So they're not finding as much local institutional support as maybe they would have before. Now, for Candy's efforts, she was largely unsupported 2 years ago, having only raised $10,000 personally and barely any outside money. But this time around, she's so far raised $34,000 and has $40,000 in outside help. So you saw what she's done with $10,000, and she's been in office. More people have warmed up to her. Now we can see what she's going to do with $74,000, and it'll be interesting to see how all this shakes out. There's just, in conclusion here, as we've gone through over the last few days, the establishment is just out over their skis, finding the worst candidates they can. They're just not good at this. And their consultants are like bad at this too. When is the last time any of these people had won a contested primary? I don't know. And honestly, I can't remember. Kind of interesting to see. Well, y'all, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Make sure you tune in tomorrow. You're not going to want to miss it. Hope you have a great rest of your